Whether reason will prevail depends only partly upon us. We must hope and strive for the best. We must prepare for the worst.
Welcome to Clearer Than Truth, the podcast where we explore the critical perspectives shaping our world today. Our guest is Karen Elliott House, a distinguished journalist, expert on global affairs, and former publisher of the Wall Street Journal. Over her prolific career, Karen has interviewed world leaders, won the Pulitzer Prize for her coverage of the Middle East, and authored essential books including On Saudi Arabia and her most recent book, which came out this year, The Man Who Would Be King, Mohammed bin Salman and the Transformation of Saudi Arabia. Her insights have influenced international reporting and foreign policy discussions for decades. Karen, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I want to jump right in. Today, it has been 24 years, actually, since the 9/11 attacks on New York and Washington, D.C. Immediately after the attacks, many in the U.S. and in the West blamed Saudi Arabia for having a role in it. I think a lot of people see this to be true, but Saudi Arabia has found its way back into good graces with the U.S. How do you think Saudi Arabia went from being a pariah state to being an accepted ally of the United States so quickly?
Well, 24 years is not necessarily quickly, but I'm not here to defend Saudi Arabia, but I think that I just see no reason why King Abdullah would have ordered an attack on America. I mean, there were lots of Saudi terrorists. The people attacked the mosque in 1979, and and the Saudis themselves became victims of terrorism in Riyadh in 2003 and 4 and 5, and then they tried to crack down on it. So I think there are just terrorists, and that's part of what he is trying to root out by diminishing the role of Wahhabism in Saudi Arabia to create a more moderate Islam. I'm not sure that it is accomplished yet, but if he can accomplish it, it would be beneficial to us because we remain the target of Islamic radical terrorists, sort of wherever they are, us in Israel.
And George, of course, jump in whenever, but let's unpack this a bit. People hear that phrases such as Wahhabism or things like that. How does Wahhabism tie into Saudi leadership over the last 100 years? You, I know, broke this down in your recent book, The Man Who Would Be King, but help pull on this thread for our listeners for a bit.
Well, the first Saudi state, they now say, was founded in 1727, and it had nothing to do, they now say, with Mr. Abdul Wahhab. Whereas for all of my nearly 50 years of going to Saudi Arabia, the founding story was that Mr. Abdul Wahhab was fleeing for his life, having stoned a woman and, for prostitution, and met up with the Al Sauds, and who were trying to subdue all the tribes in Arabia to be the king of the mountain. And they came together and formed an alliance. And so the founding story, until King Salman and MBS took over and changed it 2 years ago, was that it was a marriage between religion and the Al Saud that founded the state. Now they are trying to separate religion and the Al Saud, so they have a new founding story, which I found fascinating. That you just, as I said in the book, it's as if we tried to write George Washington out of the founding of America. Just, he was the general, he built the country, and then, whoops, nope, he didn't have anything to do with it. So it's but Mr. Abdul Wahab was a religious fanatic who believed that Arabia was full of you know, polytheists and needed to be brought back to the way it was at that point. 14, 1100 years before, when the Prophet Muhammad was walking the earth.
I'm fascinated by this kind of attempt by the Saudis currently to rewrite that history because, I believe that there's this assumption among Americans that if you have a Saudi government that professes a desire to reform Saudi society, that you're going to have this warming of relations between the U.S. and Saudi. And I've always kind of thought, like, from the beginning, this was a bit of a flawed assumption. I mean, I look at King Faisal's reign, which of course was an extraordinary episode of reform. He ultimately, paid a terrible price for that. But at the same time, it was quite a cool relationship between the U.S. and Saudi then. And so I wonder, is that a kind of never-ending illusion that the U.S. is demanding of Saudi this kind of reform that is not necessarily on the horizon, and then when they try it, it doesn't really result in what the U.S. wants? Or how do you see that?
Yeah, I think Americans expect that Saudi Arabia should be like us, and it just isn't. The whole creation of the relationship 80 plus years ago, when FDR met Ibn Saud, the old founder of this third Saudi kingdom, uh, we we needed oil to help with World War II and post World War, um, and that a need doesn't change the culture of either country. So it has been that we were close. No, we're not. Um, and under John Kennedy, when King Faisal was there, he was pushing them to end slavery in the 60s. And, that they did do that in the 60s. But, none of these kings have been like America. Mohammed bin Salman is a young man, but he is entirely educated in Saudi Arabia. He is a proud Saudi. He's not like a lot of Saudis trying to learn to be American. He he thinks that what he's trying to do with the country is the right thing to do, and it's not to Americanize it; it's to modernize it, and to moderate the terrorist tendencies of Islam, but it isn't to make it like a little America. And it's it has changed totally since I started going there, in that you can eat now in fine restaurants. Men and women can go out together. Women can go out in groups together. Women are working in every job in the kingdom now, instead of being limited to teaching and producing babies. Um, but it's not little America. Most women, it's still a conservative country, and we have conservatives in this country, but we also have many liberals. But the Saudis, the country is still fundamentally conservative. It's still prepared to obey the ruler, because people have never had any opportunity to govern themselves. It's not something that they had and miss. So they're much more accepting of obedience, taking orders, obeying the king, obeying Allah, in a way that Americans simply cannot identify with.
George, of course, if you have a follow up, that's fine. But I want to ask a bit about Mohammed bin Salman's rise to power. He famously sort of beat out one of his many cousins. How did he take power, especially considering he wasn't always the predetermined leader?
Well, that was part of what I was interested in. How did he get this job? Because he was the sixth son of King Salman. So, in a hierarchical society, he should have amounted to nothing, um, or almost nothing at least. But he was a striver. He says that his mother um, told him and he's the eldest of her six sons, and she is the third wife, that his mother told them, don't be also rans to the first wife's boys. Get out there and do something, because he said she did not want to be a shadow wife. So she seemed to have made him a striver, and he, for whatever reason, seemed to feel that he had a lot of cousins who thought they were, or and who were richer and more important, but he was determined to do more than they did. So he would look, as he told me, for things to do and do it. Things, he said, I would try to see things that his cousins didn't see and do them. And then when he had done it, do something else. He tried to build a reputation as a doer, but I don't think much came of that until his father's two eldest sons died within a year of each other in early 2001, too. And he began to follow his father around because his father was grieving and the other older boys were busy. And Mohammed was about 17, so he followed him, he helped him, he learned, he listened, he ingratiated himself. And he also tried to ingratiate himself with King Abdullah by, he told me, doing things that others didn't want to do. So, for instance, telling one of his aunts to move out of a big palace because the husband that the prince that had lived there died, the king actually he was, and she tried to stay in the palace, and the king Abdullah wanted her out, but he couldn't get her out. So Mohammed went over with a bus with a lot of servant ladies on it and told her, they're here to help you pack, and at 11 o'clock tonight, all the electricity goes off in the palace. So, he was not, he's not afraid of doing things that others might find impolite or impolitic.
Here, and I think he was the advisor to many of the girlfriends who have broken up with me because they did the same thing. But I want to dive a bit into his early tenure. He was, I think, 29 years old, a year younger than I am, when he became the crown prince after being the defense secretary.
And you're not crown prince yet?
Not yet. In my own mind, I'm getting there, but one day. I'm too focused on surfing, to be honest, to ever actually get too deep into politics. But as soon as he came into office, almost immediately, he did a crackdown where he locked up a lot of the oligarchs, a lot of his relatives. They're almost all related indirectly. He also then, in 2018, ordered the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, who was a writer for the Washington Post, who had deep ties within Saudi. As soon as that happened, you saw leaders such as Ari Emanuel, you saw political leaders in the U.S. Almost everyone treated him like a pariah and cut him out of sort of the global elite circle. Now he's in. In hindsight, do you think that his crackdown and murder of Jamal Khashoggi were necessary for him to retain power early in his tenure?
Absolutely not. I mean, I knew Khashoggi in my times of going there because he worked for the royal family. He worked for King Abdullah a lot. And, I just I don't see him as a threat. Obviously, what I think matters not a whit. But, the last time I saw him, I mentioned in the book that he said, I prefer democracy as a way of having accountability but at least we have KPIs making some fun of the fact that the Crown Prince was keeping key performance indicators on each of his ministers. So he had a certain humor, a sense of humor about it. But he was upset, and he said he was upset that he could not write because that's what he wanted to do, to comment. And I'm sure I didn't read every column he wrote in the Washington Post, but I don't know, I just never found that his column was, rabidly anti Mohammed, and wanting democracy and finding a way to achieve it are two very different things where Saudi Arabia is concerned. So, no, that's a long winded answer, but I did not think he was a threat. And I do think that was as I say in the book, it was a rendition gone wrong. They wanted to take him back to Saudi Arabia where they could punish him, jail him, maybe kill him. I don't know. But, they what they do in Saudi Arabia doesn't attract as much attention as what they do in their consulate in Istanbul or somewhere. So it was clearly a big mistake on their part to do what they did. And he has lived down much of that, I think. I mean, people see that he's still there, that he's very likely to be king, but it will never go away entirely. As we say in the U.S., for people's mistakes, it will be in your New York Times obituary, and it will be in his obituary.
Well, he may never live it down, and George, please do jump in whenever, but he may never live it down, but he is accepted. He's a feature every year at Davos, as you point out. He's also a feature at Davos in the desert, highlighting projects such as NEOM. How did he go from being almost seen like someone like Saddam Hussein to part of the club? How did he bounce back?
Mm. Well, if you recall, right after it happened, he went to Argentina to a G20 meeting, and everyone, basically, except Putin, with whom he had the famous high five, they ignored him. Um, and then COVID came along in 2020, so he was fortunate that basically world travel by leaders pretty much curtailed, and the fact that he couldn't be accepted anywhere didn't show up so much because no one was going anywhere. And he went to China, where he knew obviously he wouldn't be asked about human rights, to visit. And I think, over the 2017 Davos in the Desert, the Future Investment Forum, was his coming. No, that's before Khashoggi. I don't think he's attended the Future Investment Forum in person since the Khashoggi killing, although he probably will this year, I would suspect. But uh, he had. What's her name, Gloria Gaynor, singing at the 2019 maybe FFI. I will survive. I will not die. Oh no, not I will survive. Which was kind of, everyone in the audience knew it was his statement to FFI that I'm not here physically, but I'm here and I will survive. I think it's just it's persistence. He just, excuse me, George. He just kept um, persisting because I don't think he. I think he believes that what he does, he if it's necessary to do it, just do it.
Right. No. I
Sorry,
mean,
George.
I'm really, perfect transition to my question because, just as we look back at Saudi history, I mean, I think it was Ibn al Saud's kind of use of the Ikhwan sort of tribal warriors and his willingness to kind of join hands with the ulema, these kind of warrior priests who are out willing to kind of organize and discipline society. These are folks that ordinarily would kind of threaten the throne's power, but he joined with them to establish this state. And so the Saudi kings who kind of are willing to be utterly ruthless seem to be the ones that survive and succeed. But I mean, do you think that what's sort of shocking about MBS is that he's such a departure from the sort of intentionally less sort of acerbic in public Saudi kings of the last kind of couple of decades who could embrace people like President Obama and so on, where is he like his ancestors or not like his ancestors? What do you think?
I think he is very much like his grandfather, Ibn Saud, who fought a 30-year civil war to subdue the tribes and found the kingdom of Saudi Arabia in 1932. Ibn Saud is the one that used the Ikhwan to help him subdue the country. And then when they were threatening to go into Iraq against the British wishes, and the British were paying Ibn Saud money because he didn't have oil wealth at the time, he simply, cut them off. And this Mohammed bin Salman, I believe, is the most powerful ruler because he is ruling Saudi Arabia today. He's not yet king, but um, that he is the most powerful ruler since his grandfather. Um, because when his grandfather died, as you know, he had 44 sons, and those sons started becoming king, but the first one was kind of a mess and bankrupt the country. The second was King Faisal, who you all mentioned, but King Faisal was a reformer, a man of great religious rectitude, but his nephew killed him. And then um, King Khalid didn't want to be king, so he let his crown prince run the country. And then that crown prince had a heart problem and, was half dead for 20 years and then finally died. And by then, Abdullah was already 80 and became king. So that, there hasn't been a live, alert uh, king with an agenda of change really since his grandfather and King Faisal. And Faisal didn't live long enough as king to get much done.
Can we unpack this a little bit? I want to understand, and I think our listeners would like to understand what actual governing in Saudi Arabia looks like. It's something I wondered about. You hit on it a bit in your book, but I, to be honest, do not yet understand. He almost is an absolute ruler, yet there's still a legislative body. How much control over policy does he actually have in the government, and what does it look like? Can he simply sign the equivalent of an executive order and something changes immediately? How much pushback does he get from the courts, both religious and not religious? And how much influence do actual legislators or professional members of the government have?
He can do essentially anything he wants to. The parliament is what I call a Potemkin parliament. The members are all appointed by the king. So it is intended to give people, it's like the UN, a place to debate, but the UN has, it doesn't manage to make anybody do anything. The Shura Council, as their Potemkin parliament is called, can debate things, but unless the king decides to act on what they say or do, it has no actionable content. So he has ministers, and the ministers that this king and MBS have are far superior in education and energy to any of the ones that existed in my previous 40 years of dealing with ministers. Um, but they are simply advisors, and the best description I think of the government was given, and it's in the book, was given by now King Salman when he was Prince Salman, governor of Riyadh. And I went to see him, and he was explaining to me why we can't be a democracy in Saudi Arabia, that we have 300 plus tribes and everyone would be a party, and that would mean chaos. So we, meaning the the princely government, so the king and the crown prince, and they have 13 provisional governors, we consult and with people, tribal leaders, ministers, others, we consult and then we decide. And I think that is exactly the right description. They do consult um, uh, with people. They hold these majlises where people can come and complain, and somebody writes a piece of paper, and there's supposed to be action that follows. But most of those are just personal complaints. George stole my donkey or my camel, or they're not George saying, I think we need a new crown prince. Um, but it's there is consultation, but the royal family cadre, the key princes that are governors, and certainly the king decide. And mostly it's the king and if he lets it, the crown prince, as in this case, because they don't. The governors too don't have the ability, like a governor of Texas, to say we need new hospitals. I'm going to get the money and build them. The government from the center, from Riyadh, decides where we'll build a new hospital, where we'll build a military base. It's a very um, uh, Riyadh centric government.
Well, I
Yeah.
would be so remiss though if I didn't ask about kind of my favorite character in the whole kind of Saudi drama of at least my lifetime, which is Turki Al Faisal, who I
Hmm.
had a chance to actually
Uh-huh.
meet and dine with and listen to speak when I was in graduate school. And I was just struck by kind of his extraordinary sense of both candor and restraint in handling
Hmm.
U.S. Saudi relations. He was able to, I think, navigate the very complicated corridors of Washington. And I wonder, do you think that kind of the era of that style of Saudi diplomacy has passed, and now it's a different era because it's a different United States or a different Saudi Arabia or both? What do you think about that kind of change that might be taking place?
I mean, he is a perfect example, Turkey Faisal, um, who was ambassador to both the U.S. and Britain. And when I met him in his 30s, he was the head of intelligence. So, he's played a central role in government, a really, really skilled, intelligent, articulate man. So, as you say, he knows how to give informative answers without giving insulting answers, the kind that could come back to haunt him. Did you hear him at Georgetown or Princeton
It
or
was actually
where?
at Oxford, and
Oh, at
and
Oxford.
he had there's an auditorium sort of that the royal family has actually paid for. So he was making these
Hmm.
extraordinarily funny jokes about 100 years ago, could you imagine this, so on. But again, he was able to sort of tread this point about British colonialism
Yeah.
without being nasty.
Without being
Right,
insulting,
right.
right? No, he's a marvel. But the current foreign minister um, is who speaks German and spent time there and time in Washington and is now foreign minister is the same. He is just brilliant at being very succinct in responding to a question, a tough question, uh, and yet not in any way, making a fool of himself or insulting anyone. I mean, they have a lot of very smart royals. MBS himself, I think, is very smart. He's more direct and he doesn't have to censor himself in what he says. But so he's not quite as deft as Turkey Faisal or Faisal Farhan, the current foreign minister. But I mean, it's fun to go there and talk to people because you learn they have a lot of intelligent people now, the royals and the ministers who aren't royal.
I want to briefly talk about the future of Saudi Arabia, both in how they're going to deal with the world and then also what their country will look like. They've spent a lot of money in this project in the desert, Neom, which is sort of like and please elaborate a bit, but like a tech hub for the future in the Middle East. What does the future look like in terms of their influence in the region and their relationship with the United States? And let me caveat that with saying, obviously, the Ayatollah is 89 years old and not in the best of health. It seems to me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that he will be the most important force in the Middle East for the next several decades. What does that look like? What can we expect from him?
The Ayatollah or MBS?
MBS, after Ayatollah's
MBS.
passing.
Yeah, I think. I think the Ayatollah is constrained now, so I think MBS wants to be, and I believe will be, the important Arab voice, unless something untoward happens. Assassination or something that he's otherwise he will be, because Egypt is no longer what it used to be. Jordan is obviously a poor um, country. Um, Iraq is trying to get itself together, and the Saudis are trying to help them, uh, pull them from the Iranian influence. The Saudis are trying to help rebuild Syria now that Assad is gone. So he is involved everywhere in the Middle East, mostly in development in his own country. But he also intends to be a big man on the world stage, to have a a country that's in the top 10 of the G20, that goes to the moon. I mean, his ambitions are quite limitless, and they have money. They don't have the oil price they need. They need it to be about $90 a barrel to pay for all of these things, but they're borrowing money because oil is about below 70 right now. Um, but if he can protect all the development that he's spending trillions on and protect the production of his oil from, Iran or the Houthis or somebody that would try to um, disturb his development, as the Iranians would like to, despite diplomatic relations, um, then he will, I think, be very influential. It won't all happen by 2030. It's going to take much longer, but he's got the time. He turned 40 on August the 30th, so he's got another potentially 50 years.
He, of course, has caught MBS and Saudi Arabia have caught a lot of negative attention because of their intervention within Yemen. I don't think a lot of people in the U.S. understand why they care. They know that they're their neighbor. They know the Houthis are slowing down shipping lanes. But what is MBS's objective in intervening in Yemen?
Well, when he did that in 20, I guess 16, he was or 2015. He had just come on. I think he was more impulsive than he is now, and thought that he could rid the country of that Iranian influence, because that is the problem, really, that Iran is using the Houthis to torment Saudi Arabia and it help advance their agenda. So once he made peace with restored diplomatic relations with Iran in 2023, he had created a ceasefire in Yemen in 2022, and that ceasefire is holding. The Houthis are still, with arms from Iran, shooting at Israel and shooting at ships in the Red Sea. And the Saudi crown prince is not doing anything to help America in the Red Sea, or obviously um, Israel, because he does not want to disturb the ceasefire that he has. But it's basically to contain Iran that he was interested in the intervention.
Could I ask as just a final question? I mean,
Hmm.
we're always, I think, looking at sort of the contingencies around, MBS's own decision making, and I've always been a bit skeptical. I mean, he has this, supposed Da Vinci on a ship. I mean, the sort of things that he does to grab attention have always made me scratch my head and wonder about whether he has the kind of prudence of the kind of early Saudi leaders who had that sense of what it meant to come from a true desert. But I mention all this because some would say that this is Saudi's moment. I mean, Iran is totally on its back foot. Israel is dealing with the problems of the Iranian proxies in its territory. We've just had a potentially aligned government in Syria rise. Even Saudi's relations with Turkey are quite robust right now, and so, in a sense,
Hmm.
it might in fact be poised to do those truly ambitious things like normalizing relations with Israel or so on. But do you buy that narrative that right now is a high time? They're high on the hog in terms of their foreign policy, or is it not so much?
I think it appears to be that way, but I think, he is very nervous about what Israel is doing all over the region, because he would, uh, I believe, he still would like to have diplomatic relations with Israel to help boost foreign direct investment into the kingdom, and to create both security and commercial opportunities between the two. Um, this what uh, your colleague referred to as Silicon Valley in the Naom area. Um, so I think he's, as my mother would say, sitting on pins and needles. He's not, he's in good shape, but you can't relax, because I think there is a risk that the Israelis, who seem to be out to make sure they destroy anybody that's looking to destroy them, um, no matter the diplomatic consequences, that Israel may strike Iran again, because the Iranians are not going to give up their nuclear ambitions. And that if that happens, the Saudis could be um, at risk of Iranian retaliation because the U.S. has military capabilities in Saudi Arabia, and whether we participate or not, the Iranians have basically said if we get hit, we're going to hit any and everybody in sight. So you can't trust Iran. They don't trust Israel right now not to be more aggressive. So I think he's like an old setting hen over his developments. He is trying to protect those and protect the oil wealth that allows his hen to lay more eggs, to continue my analogy. But he just can't be certain that the ground under them isn't going to shake from all that's going on in the region.
You, Karen, have given us generously 40 minutes of your time, but and this truly will be our final question, because I could keep you all day, but I also know George has a lot today. But as someone who has spent a lot of time with the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, do you think he will be able to achieve his goals within his lifetime?
I think if he lives, he will be able to moderate the religion and modernize the country. Maybe not to what our view of modernization is, or moderation, but that they're young people, and 60% of the population is under 30. Young people, by and large, do find what he's offering, a better economy and boundless entertainment, in a country where there were no movies, no music, no sports they could participate in. And now they have everything, entertainment wise. So I think they like that. And the fact that he is more repressive on free speech has not yet seemed to bother Saudis, because, as I said earlier, they never had much opportunity. It was a tribal society. When the tribal chief didn't take care of you, somebody killed him and took his place. They didn't have a Zoom meeting or a campfire to vote on the next chief. So people aren't used to that. So they don't. I think they don't miss it as they become more independent. He's telling people, as John Kennedy said, "Ask not what the country can do for you, but what you can do for the country." So as they become more dependent on themselves, they may decide, if I'm looking after myself, why do I need a king? But I think that's quite a ways off, if ever, because people, that's a monarchy that's got 300, nearly 300 years of running the country off and on, mostly on. So I think, a kind of uprising is not that likely if he can learn to, like Turkey Faisal that George was talking about earlier, manage deftly to say the right things to people in the country and externally, and be smart. And I think he's pretty smart.
Thank you for joining this episode of Clearer Than Truth. And a special thanks to Karen House for sharing her invaluable expertise on Saudi Arabia, global politics, and the evolving landscape of international affairs. Tune in next time.